everyone, welcome back to Holistic Doula Haven. I am Kiara, a holistic birth and postpartum doula. If you're new here, this is a safe space for all to feel empowered about their pregnancy journeys, their birth experiences, and beyond that. A little bit about what a doula is. We are non-medical professional support people for people who are pregnant, giving birth, and in the postpartum world. We don't do anything medical, but we provide educational support, hands-on support, and holistic doulas extend a little bit beyond that. So we take in the whole person and kind of support like the mind, body, and spirit. So if you want to learn more about that, you can listen to the first and second episode, where I kind of dive deeper into what I do. And today's episode is kind of a heavy topic, because it's February, it's Black History Month. I'll be talking about maternal health for Black women in Canada. I haven't had kids, but I have dealt with the medical world as a Black woman. And it's exactly what you'd expect. It's not very good. It's not good for women in general, but it's worse for people of color, which is very frustrating. But it's not talked about enough, so I feel like it's my place to talk about it, shed light on it for those who might not know. And maybe for those who've had like a bad experience and wish that it was talked about, and maybe just know that somebody's out there that kind of knows what they're going through or what they went through, and just to kind of have like an ear to listen to and know that you're not alone. So if you're thinking, I didn't know this was an issue in Canada because we're the, what do they call us, the peacekeepers or peacemakers or something like that, that's a lie. You're not alone in thinking that. There's lots of struggles that Black women face in Canada as mothers, through their pregnancy and birth and postpartum. So I'm going to talk about the current state of Black maternal health and the systemic barriers that we face, as well as a little bit about how it is to be a Black doula in Canada, or just any birth worker in Canada, for people of color, and how we can advocate for ourselves and make a change, hopefully someday. So let's talk about the reality of Black maternal health in Canada. So when we talk about like the differences with maternal health, a lot of people automatically jump to other countries in the world, and they kind of skip over Canada because they think we're just like happy and friendly over here. Depends on where you are, but usually not. So the mortality rate for Black women in general is 3 times higher than white women. And Canada is a part of that. So in 2023, there was a study published by the Canadian Medical Association, that found that Black and Indigenous women face worse realities and health outcomes during pregnancy and birth, especially. If you look back into any history when it comes to maternal health, it's always corrupt. There's always something weird. We're always overlooked constantly, so like it's not a new thing. It's not a shocking thing. But a lot of people don't know about it. Black women in Canada are more likely to experience preterm birth, receive inadequate care, especially when it comes to pain management, and have their concerns dismissed by their healthcare providers. Canada doesn't track the maternal health data by race the same way other places might, which is why it's overlooked and swept under the rug a lot of times, which makes it hard for it to be known, makes it hard for people to talk about, and just it's just like confusing in general if there's not a lot of data and resources going into it. And it's just ignored by a lot of people, which is, again, very frustrating. But it's not just about like the statistics and the numbers and like however people measure those things. It's about real people who've actually experienced it, real families, and the trauma that follows along with that. I know a couple people who've experienced racist encounters in the maternal health setting. As Black women, I've supported, I believe, only 3 Black women, just because it's like, it's so hard to find any sort of medical anybody or support person for maternal health care, especially in Canada, just because it's not really advertised that much. You don't really see it. Like when you look at movies and TV shows, there's always, it's never like there's nobody of color that's like represented. So people just assume like they're not out here, but we're here, hidden in the back. So that kind of brings me into the next topic of overlooked issues, which is Black doulas, but also like midwives, doctors, and challenges that we face in our own community. A lot of times, like as a doula, like I've been doing it for I think 2 years now, but like I'm usually the only person of color, which it doesn't bother me all that much, but sometimes it can feel a little bit isolating just because like there's a lot of stuff that, people I work with, they'll just kind of like throw out suggestions and make it seem like it's so easy, but like, it's not the same situation for everybody. A lot of people have like partners and different resources to actually help them out with, for example, continuing their education or expanding on it. We don't really have that opportunity as much. It's not given to us as much. And there's a lot of like assumptions that we lack knowledge, which I've personally experienced a lot of things like I'm a Black woman, but I'm also young. So a lot of people who are a little bit higher up than me just assume that I don't know what I'm talking about, which is a confidence damper. And it's just annoying because I'm an argumentative person. So it just makes me want to like fight back kind of thing. And I don't want to get in trouble. So, like we play a crucial role for those families. A couple clients that I've had in the past, they were like, I literally could not find a Black doula anywhere. I typed it into Google, nothing came up. Like, I don't know how they managed to find my profile on Instagram, but they did. And they were like, I, was so worried going into this situation, not having anybody that really understands what it's like to be me. And it's nice to hear, but at the same time, it's very sad to know that that's the fears that my clients were experiencing, especially trying to create such a sacred space and positive experience, and just knowing like I could be going into a hospital and get dismissed completely. There was a time that actually there still is people out there who believe that Black women don't have as many pain receptors, which I have no idea how that even makes sense because we literally are all human beings. So I'm like that, I don't even get it. And in the past, like if you go back and look into the history of like how gynecology started, it was practiced on Black women slaves without anesthesia. That's kind of how they figured out what to use and things like that, because again, they assumed we didn't have pain receptors or our pain tolerance was higher, so they could just kind of practice on us however they wanted. If you look in medical books, there's a separate section for women of color or just people in general. There's different sections, and they're like, they experience it differently. I'm like, that's not how it works. So just knowing that, it's hard to navigate, being the one who's kind of in that vulnerable position, especially if it's your first time or even your second time, doctors will dismiss your pain. They'll dismiss how you're feeling. There's been lots of cases where women give birth and they're a couple hours maybe postpartum, and some women have hemorrhage, some women have died because the doctors just assumed they were being dramatic or nothing was wrong with them. And if you look at it, it mostly only happens to women of color because of that assumption, or they just don't care as much. Whatever the reason is for those medical professionals to just look over, it always happens, and it still happens to this day. And being a Black doula as well, sometimes it's very difficult for us to even do our job when you're surrounded by, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 doctors that are doubting your abilities, and knowing that you can't speak for your clients, it makes it that much harder because in your mind, you know, like, this is not okay. But you can't say anything, you can't do anything. I've had one experience where that was kind of the case, and it was very chaotic. It was a negative experience for my client and her husband and her family. It was a negative experience for me. And in addition to that, like, with different cultures, there's different practices, there's different traditions when it comes to giving birth. And if you're in North America in general, it's not something that's respected as much. The doctors just want to do their job and take control of the situation. So having that taken away happens a lot more than you would think. And as well, like, working with, like, organizations and just, like, being a doula on your own as well. Sometimes, like, you might be paid differently or you might be treated differently. Again, I've had that happen to me before. And it's really disheartening. And again, it's very isolating. Like I said, it doesn't bother me all that much just because I know how to speak up for myself. I know how to leave a situation if I feel like I'm not being treated fairly. I will say my piece and then I will leave and go seek somewhere else that is going to support me better. And then just, like, understanding from a doula perspective, like, the postpartum experience, just knowing kind of how that looks for Black women. It's nice for clients to know that there's somebody out there for them that really understands everything. Like I said, the whole pain receptors thing. Same thing goes with babies. There was a time where people didn't believe that babies had pain receptors either. I have no idea where this notion came from. It's so ridiculous to me. It makes no sense. But especially babies of color, they just assume they can do whatever they want and kind of gaslight you into thinking that you're crazy, and that wasn't the situation that happened. So it's important for me to, like, share that knowledge with people so that they are aware that this is still happening to this day. Which brings me into my next point, the lack of awareness about what's going on, but also the lack of awareness of Black maternal professionals. Same thing as doulas. A lot of people can't find a Black OB or a Black midwife. You kind of, like, it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Like, you just cannot find them anywhere. Either you know somebody or they just pop up somewhere on your timeline, and that's kind of how you find out about them. But even Black families don't know that we're out there. Like, it's just not common knowledge, seemingly, which isn't anybody's fault in particular. It's just that the conversations are not happening and people are being ignored. So it doesn't really allow much room for us to be kind of out there with all the other ones. And then, like I mentioned, being undervalued and underpaid. We're not seen as knowing as much. Our knowledge seems to be lacking to other people. And then, of course, financial barriers. When you're becoming a doula, because it's like a personal choice, a lot of people have to pay for it themselves. Um, and if you're working in a place that doesn't pay you as much as your white coworker, you can't really put as much funding into that. Um, so, the assumption again is like, well, you can just do it like I did it, but that's not the case. Not everybody has the same financial means. Not everybody is in the same situation to put extra funding into their education. Um, and then struggling to find grants, funding, or an environment that's actually going to support them. Sometimes you might get a case where, say, you're a midwife and you want to work for a group or a collective or whatever. Um, they might assume, well, she doesn't know, like, she doesn't have the knowledge, so we're not going to hire her. Same with Black obstetricians or nurses. They as well might be overlooked because they assume that their knowledge is lacking and they don't know as much. Um, and then just like being in the system in general, like the whole systemic racism. Um, for doulas, we're there for the family. But when it comes to like midwives and nurses, they can get overlooked by doctors and talked over. Like I said, I've seen it firsthand. I've had multiple clients who've had midwives that were white, and the same situation as my Black client happened, and I compared the two, and I was like, okay, well, this client was told the same thing. It wasn't a problem, but my other client was told the same thing, and it was a big issue, and all of a sudden nobody knew anything. Everybody's knowledge was lacking, and nobody knew what they were talking about. And it was really sad to see because I was like, this is not true. Like, this is not correct. I've been in the field long enough to know that you guys are being kind of shady. Especially in hospitals, which is why a lot of Black women opt for home births, just because of the fear of being talked over and not being listened to. Malpractices happen as well with that. So and then the whole advocating thing. Um, if you're somebody who's a little bit timid and a little bit afraid to speak up for themselves, that's when things can happen that you don't want. But even still, even if you know how to advocate yourself, it's that much more work. Like, you take being a woman in maternal health care, that's already like an issue of its own. But then you add a little bit of color to your skin, and it's like that much more work. So, as a Black doula, just like knowing all the information that I know about it, it's so much more important for me to support Black families, and really making sure that they know how to advocate and speak up for themselves. Knowing which doctors I know will be supportive of anybody, so that I can refer them to those people, or, give them options like, these doctors are really good. You won't have any issues with, anything when it comes to going into labor. But I think it's really important for everybody to talk about. So from here, like, how can we change the narrative? How can we make birth safer for Black women in Canada and the whole world? Hiring a Black doula or a Black midwife, if that's the route that you're going. If you are comfortable with your OB, or there's something going on in your pregnancy that a midwife is not an option, having a Black doula to be there, just to have somebody extra in your corner, can make a big difference. Or just like spreading awareness, donating to organizations that support Black doulas. I believe there's Black Doulas Canada, and I know there's one in Ontario. And as somebody who's not a Black person, just like reading up on it, asking questions. A lot of people are scared to ask questions because they feel like they're being offensive, but they're not. I would much rather somebody ask questions than like speak on it themselves as a non-Black person, because to me it's just so funny, because I'm like, you don't even have the experience to back up what you're saying. Like, you just read about it somewhere, but like you don't know firsthand. And then taking a stand for it, demanding that there's a change in our healthcare for women, especially for women of color. Starting by tracking maternal health statistics by race rather than just a whole group. Seeing the division for people, I feel like will get them talking more. And once we see that, that's when we can like really push for change and advocate better. And then educating our own communities. Like I said, there was a lot of Black families that I've worked with that didn't know that Black doulas were out there, or Black midwives, or even like friends and family. Just letting them know, like, we're here, this is what we do, this is what's going on. Because the more people know about it, the more you can spread awareness and make sure that it's not happening or happening less, just so that everybody can be treated fairly. That being said, Black maternal health it's not just a Black issue, it's a human's right issue. Like I said, people have died from being overlooked and being mistreated. So just like getting people to treat us like human beings is, where we need our hearts to be, because we deserve better. We deserve to be heard. We deserve to be respected and treated the same as every other woman who's going into becoming a parent. So if this is an episode that spoke to you, touched your heart, resonated with you, whether you're a Black person or not, please feel free to share it with anybody that you know, because like I said, sharing it and educating people is how we can make change. And of course, this is an issue that, resonates a lot with me. So I'm glad that I have something to be able to share this with people. But I hope you enjoyed hearing about some new knowledge maybe you weren't aware of. But stay tuned for the next episode. And thanks for listening.